Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Rob Peterson drove up to his peaceful lakeside cabin after months away, he expected tranquility, not chaos. Instead, he found his land encircled by a towering fence, claimed as a recreation area by a powerful HOA. Determined to reclaim what was his, Rob prepared for a fight that would change everything. Rob Peterson leaned back in his chair, savoring the memory of the day he first laid eyes on the property. It was 2 years ago, and the moment he saw the cozy wood-paneled cabin nestled on the shores of Silver Haven Lake, he knew it was his. The cabin wasn't luxurious by any means, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a dock that creaked underfoot, but it was perfect. Surrounded by dense evergreens and the gentle lapping of water against the shoreline, it was a place that promised peace and solace. For Rob, the cabin represented more than a getaway. It was a refuge from the endless deadlines and stress that came with his job as a construction engineer. His wife, Sarah, adored the idea of escaping the city with their 2 children, Tom and Amy, to experience nature in its purest form. In the first year, they visited often, packing the car for weekends by the lake or spending extended summer holidays, fishing, grilling, and sharing stories under the stars. The property, tucked at the far end of a gravel road, was adjacent to several similar homes. Most were either vacation rentals or owned by retirees who spent their days in serene seclusion. But just across the ridge sat the pristine, gated community of Pineview Estates, an elite neighborhood with sprawling houses and an aggressive homeowners association known for enforcing its will with ironclad resolve. Rob's cabin wasn't part of Pineview, but he had heard whispers of how the HOA occasionally overstepped its bounds, pushing their influence onto neighboring properties. He never thought it would concern him. In the second year of owning the cabin, life got hectic. Work projects piled up. Sarah's teaching job demanded more hours, and Tom and Amy were busy with extracurriculars. The trips to the lake became fewer and further apart. By the time winter rolled in, they hadn't visited the cabin in months. Snow blanketed the property, making access difficult, and Rob decided they'd make up for the lost time in the spring. Now, 8 months later, the family packed their SUV early on a Saturday morning, brimming with excitement. It was late spring, and the idea of returning to their sanctuary after so long filled them with joy. The kids argued playfully in the back seat about who would claim the best spot on the dock, while Sarah made a mental list of everything they needed to do once they arrived. Clean the cabin, mow the lawn, and restock the pantry. The gravel crunched under the tires as Rob turned onto the familiar road that wound its way around Silver Haven Lake. The morning sunlight shimmered on the water, and for a moment, he felt a deep sense of contentment. But as the cabin came into view, that feeling was replaced by confusion, then shock. A tall, imposing metal fence encircled the entire property. It was new, gleaming silver links that stretched from one corner of the lot to the other, cutting off access to the house, the dock, and the driveway. A large sign was affixed to the gate. Private recreation area, access restricted to Pineview Estates residents. Rob slammed on the brakes, his mouth falling open. "What the hell?" he muttered. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. Instead of answering, Rob stepped out of the car. His boots crunched on the gravel as he approached the gate. The padlocked chain clanked when he touched it, and he noticed a keypad installed next to the gate, likely requiring a code he didn't have. Beyond the fence, his cabin looked eerily untouched, but the surrounding area was a completely different story. The dock was covered in towels and bags, signs of recent use. In the yard, there were rows of patio chairs, several barbecue grills, and even a wooden dance floor set up with speakers on either side. This wasn't just an encroachment, it was a complete takeover. "Who did this?" Rob whispered, anger simmering beneath the surface. He glanced around, looking for anyone who might provide answers. His eyes landed on a group of teenagers lounging by the dock, splashing each other and laughing. "Hey!" he called out. "What are you doing on my property?" The teenagers didn't respond. One of them glanced his way briefly before turning back to their friends, unconcerned. Rob felt his jaw tighten. He walked back to the SUV, his face pale with fury. "There's a fence around the property," he told Sarah, his voice low. "What do you mean a fence? Around the whole thing?" "Yes, and it says it belongs to Pineview Estates now." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "That can't be legal. Are you sure this is the right place?" Rob shot her a look, and she raised her hands apologetically. "Of course you're sure. Sorry. She took a deep breath. Maybe we should call the police. Not yet, Rob said, shaking his head. First, I want to know what's going on. This doesn't make sense. Determined, he got back into the car, gripping the wheel tightly. A plan was already forming in his mind. If Pineview thought they could get away with this, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Rob's heart pounded as he stood before the gleaming chain-link fence, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. The cabin he had worked so hard to maintain, the land he had poured his savings into, it was all there, but surrounded by a barrier that screamed, "You don't belong here anymore." He wasn't going to let that slide. Returning to his car, he grabbed a tow strap from the trunk. Sarah leaned out the window, concern etched across her face. "What are you doing, Rob?" "I'm taking my property back," he replied, his voice firm. Hooking one end of the strap to the sturdy metal gate and the other to his SUV's hitch, he climbed into the driver's seat. With a deep breath, he shifted the car into gear and pressed the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward, and with a deafening metallic groan, the gate tore free from its hinges. The kids cheered from the back seat, but Sarah looked worried. "Are you sure about this? What if—" "They've left me no choice," Rob interrupted. Driving through the now open entrance, he parked the car and stepped out to survey the scene. The extent of the invasion became clear. The once pristine lawn was now trampled and strewn with chairs and tables. A row of grills emitted the faint scent of recent use, and the dance floor setup was a surreal addition to the property. Even more shocking, a large above-ground pool had been installed in the middle of the yard, complete with floaties bobbing in the water. At the dock, the group of teenagers paused their laughter, noticing Rob for the first time. He waved them over. "Hey, what's going on here? This is private property." The teenagers exchanged glances, then turned back to their fun, ignoring him entirely. Annoyed but undeterred, Rob strode toward the cabin. Before he could reach it, the door burst open, and a group of adults spilled out. 5 women and 6 men stared at him in shock, their expressions quickly turning hostile. One of the men, a broad-shouldered guy in cargo shorts and sunglasses, stepped forward, crossing his arms. "Who the hell do you think you are?" the man barked. "I'm Rob Peterson," Rob replied, standing his ground. "This is my land, and I want an explanation for what's going on here." A tall woman with a Bluetooth headset smirked and folded her arms. "You mean our land? Hate to break it to you, buddy, but this is part of the Pineview Estates recreation area now. That's what the sign says." Rob clenched his fists. "This is my property. I have the deed to prove it. I want all of you off this land immediately." The group burst into laughter, the sound grating on Rob's nerves. Another man, holding a half-empty soda can, sneered. "Get real, pal. You haven't been here for months. Everyone knows it was abandoned." "Abandoned? I pay taxes on this place." Rob shot back, his voice rising. "You've got no right to be here." The tension escalated when one of the teenagers, emboldened by the adults' jeers, picked up a rock and hurled it at Rob's SUV. The stone hit the headlight with a loud crack, shattering the glass. Sarah screamed from the car, and Rob felt his blood boil. "That's enough," he roared, stepping closer to the group. Cargo Shorts stepped forward, his tone dripping with mockery. "You don't get it, do you? You're not in charge here. Why don't you get back in your car and drive away before we call security?" Rob ignored him, pulling his phone from his pocket. He tapped the record button, making sure his voice was clear. "I'm giving you all one warning. You are trespassing on private property, which belongs to me. I have the right to ask you to leave. If you refuse, I'll have the police deal with you." At first, there was silence. Then, the woman with the headset stepped forward, her expression shifting from smug to furious. "You think you can just show up and push us around? You broke our gate. That's destruction of property, and you'll pay for it." "This is my gate," Rob countered, his voice like steel. "And this is my land. Now get off it before I—" A commotion behind him made Rob turn. From the house emerged another man, this one holding something that made Rob's stomach drop, his hunting rifle. "Time to go," the man said, leveling the gun at Rob. For a moment, everything froze. Sarah screamed from the car. The kids huddled in the back seat. The group of intruders stood still, watching Rob for his next move. He raised his hand slowly, the anger in his chest giving way to cold calculation. He couldn't risk his family's safety. Not now. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "You've made your point." He backed toward his car, the rifle following his every move. When he climbed into the driver's seat, Sarah whispered, "Rob, what's happening? What are we going to do?" "We're leaving," he said, backing the SUV out of the driveway. As they pulled onto the gravel road, a gunshot rang out. The man with the rifle had fired, shattering one of the car's remaining headlights. The children screamed, and Sarah gasped, gripping Rob's arm. "We have to call someone," she said, her voice shaking. "Oh, I will," Rob muttered, gripping the wheel tightly. "I'm going to call everyone I know." Rob's SUV hadn't even left the gravel road when the growl of another engine caught his attention. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows roared toward his property, pulling up just as he stopped to glance in the rearview mirror. The vehicle skidded to a halt, and out stepped a woman in her early 50s, immaculately dressed in a tailored blazer and pencil skirt. Her demeanor radiated authority, but her scowl betrayed simmering fury. The woman wasted no time. She slammed her car door, stormed toward Rob's partially demolished gate, and began barking orders to the group of intruders still gathered on the property. "What the hell is going on here? Who let this maniac onto our land?" Rob stepped out of his SUV, meeting her fiery gaze. "Our land?" he shot back. "This is my land. You're trespassing." She let out a humorless laugh, pulling out her phone as if preparing for battle. "You must be Rob Peterson. I'm Karen Hendricks, president of Pineview Estates HOA. And let me make one thing clear. You just destroyed our property by ripping out our gate." Rob bristled. "Your gate? That fence went up illegally around my property. This is private land, and I have the paperwork to prove it." Karen held up a hand as though dismissing a noisy child. "I don't care what papers you think you have. The Pineview HOA has every right to claim unused land that poses a risk to the community. Your absence for months made this property an eyesore, so we stepped in to turn it into a useful recreational area." "A useful? You can't just steal someone's land because you don't like how it looks." Rob interrupted, his voice rising. "Oh, we didn't steal it," Karen said smugly. "We filed the proper paperwork to annex this property into the Pineview jurisdiction. If you'd bothered to maintain it, maybe you'd have a case. But the police will be here soon, and when they arrive, they'll see you for the vandal you are." Rob's knuckles tightened around his phone as he silently recorded her rant. Behind Karen, the group of intruders had started whispering nervously, sensing that the situation was escalating. "Here's what's going to happen," Karen continued, now pacing in front of him. "You're going to pack up your family and leave before the authorities get here. Otherwise, I'll ensure you're charged with destruction of property, harassment, and—" "Let me stop you right there," Rob cut her off. "I'm not going anywhere. You and everyone else on this land are trespassing. And if you think you can intimidate me with your HOA rules, you're in for a surprise." Karen's face turned red, but before she could retort, another commotion broke out. One of the men from earlier, still holding Rob's hunting rifle, had stepped closer. "Why are we even talking to this guy? Get him off the property now." Rob froze. The rifle wasn't pointed directly at him, but the threat was clear. Karen, however, didn't seem fazed. She turned to the man, her voice dripping with exasperation. "Put that away. The police will handle this." Rob took a step back toward his SUV, weighing his options. Outnumbered and now outgunned, there was little he could do. But one thing was certain, he wasn't giving up. "You think this is over?" Rob said, locking eyes with Karen as he climbed back into his car. "It's just getting started." Rob drove down the gravel road, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. The adrenaline from the confrontation still coursed through his veins, but now it was accompanied by cold, calculated determination. His family sat in tense silence, the kids huddled together in the back seat. Sarah's face was pale, her phone gripped tightly in her hands. "We can't let this go," Sarah said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "They stole our land, threatened us, and even shot at the car. This has to stop, Rob." "It will," Rob replied firmly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I'm going to fight this with everything I've got, but we need to be smart about it. First, we gather evidence. Everything." Sarah nodded, pulling up the video she had recorded earlier. It was shaky at times, but it captured everything. The broken gate, the hostile crowd, the rifle being brandished, and Karen's smug declaration that they had annexed the property. "This is gold," Rob muttered, glancing over as Sarah played back the footage. "We'll need more than just this, though. I'm calling Mark." Mark Williams, a seasoned real estate attorney and an old friend, picked up on the second ring. Rob laid out the situation, sparing no details. Mark's response was immediate and decisive. First, you need to document everything, Mark instructed. Take photos of the damage to your gate and car. Get every document you have proving ownership, the deed, tax records, even utility bills. I'll draft a lawsuit for illegal land seizure and damages, but we need a strong foundation. Rob nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. What about the rifle and the shot fired at the car? That's criminal, Mark said gravely. I'll include it in the complaint, but you need to report it to the police. If you can't trust the local precinct because of HOA influence, I'll connect you with someone higher up. Rob's next call was to his old friend, Sergeant Dave Brown. They'd served in the military together, and Dave was now a well-respected officer in the county sheriff's department. "This is insane, Rob," Dave said after hearing the story. "But don't worry, we'll handle it. I'll request an emergency warrant to investigate and secure your property. If there's any evidence of wrongdoing, we'll bring the hammer down." With Dave's assurance, Rob felt the first stirrings of relief, but there was no time to rest. Once they arrived home, Rob set to work. Sarah uploaded the video to multiple cloud storage platforms, ensuring it couldn't be lost. Rob combed through his files, pulling out the deed to the property, recent tax receipts, and utility bills that showed consistent payment, even during their absence. He even found old photos of the family enjoying the cabin, some dating back to when they first bought it. "I'm not just proving this is ours," Rob said to Sarah. "I'm going to show that they had no right to claim it as abandoned." By the time they finished, it was well past midnight. The evidence was piled high on the dining table: documents, photos, and a detailed log of everything that had happened. The next morning, Mark called with updates. "I've filed the initial lawsuit," he said, "and Dave's already secured the warrant. We're assembling a team to take back your property." Rob's lips curled into a grim smile. "Good. I'll meet them there." "You sure about that?" Mark asked cautiously. "This could get ugly." "They've already stolen my land, threatened me, and terrified my family," Rob said. "I'm not standing on the sidelines. This time, I'll be ready." Rob gripped the steering wheel tightly as he followed the convoy of 3 police vehicles down the gravel road leading to his property. The previous day's humiliation and threats burned fresh in his mind, but today he wasn't alone. Sergeant Dave Brown was leading the operation, his team armed with a court-approved warrant and enough manpower to handle any resistance. As the convoy approached the cabin, Rob's heart pounded in anticipation. Through the windshield, he saw the same chain-link fence, still partially bent and sagging from where he had torn it down. Near the gate stood a man in a bright orange vest, clipboard in hand, seemingly assessing the damage. Beside him was a patrol car, likely summoned by Karen after yesterday's incident. The scene inside the property was eerily calm. Several of the same people from the previous day lounged on the patio furniture, sipping drinks and chatting. At the far end of the yard, a few teenagers were splashing around in the pool. The audacity made Rob's blood boil, but he forced himself to remain composed. The police vehicles pulled up to the gate, engines rumbling as officers began filing out. Dave approached Rob's truck, his expression serious but calm. "You ready for this?" Rob nodded. "Let's do it." Dave signaled his team, and the officers moved into formation. As they stepped onto the property, the lounging group finally took notice. The man in the orange vest froze, his clipboard slipping from his hands. One of the women, who had been reclining with a magazine, shot to her feet, her face pale. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice shrill. Dave held up the warrant. "Sheriff's Department, we're here to enforce a court order. Everyone on this property is to vacate immediately." The woman's jaw dropped. "Vacate? Are you serious? This is Pineview Estates property." "It's not," Rob interjected, stepping forward. "This is my land, and I've got the paperwork to prove it." The woman's eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. You're the guy who wrecked the gate yesterday. You're in so much trouble. Karen's on her way, and she'll what?" Dave cut her off. "We have legal authority to remove anyone trespassing here, and that includes her." As the officers began spreading out, things quickly spiraled. The group on the patio erupted into protests, some shouting about their rights, others pulling out phones to record the officers. The teenagers scrambled out of the pool, their bravado from the previous day gone. The chaos reached a boiling point when Karen's black SUV came barreling down the road, screeching to a halt just outside the property. She leapt out, her face a mask of fury. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, storming toward Dave. "You can't do this. I already called the police. This is our jurisdiction." Dave, unfazed, handed her a copy of the warrant. "Read it. This property is not part of Pineview Estates. Your actions here have been illegal, and we're taking the necessary steps to enforce the law." Karen scanned the document, her face flushing red. "This is outrageous. You have no idea who you're messing with." Ignoring her protests, the officers moved efficiently. They began detaining individuals who refused to leave, starting with the man who had wielded Rob's rifle. He tried to back away, stammering excuses, but two officers quickly restrained him. As they cuffed him, he broke down, pleading for leniency. "I didn't mean to scare anyone," he cried. "It wasn't loaded, I swear." "Tell that to the judge," one officer replied curtly. Karen's defiance turned to desperation as she watched the scene unfold. "You can't do this. I'll sue every one of you." "You're welcome to try," Dave said dryly, "but I'd focus on hiring a defense attorney instead." As the final stragglers were led to police vehicles, Rob finally exhaled, his tension giving way to a wave of relief. For the first time in days, his property felt like it was truly his again. Dave clapped him on the shoulder. "We'll finish processing everyone back at the station. You'll need to come by to finalize your statement." "Absolutely," Rob said. "Thank you, Dave." "Really?" Dave nodded. "You're not out of the woods yet, but this was a big first step. Let's make sure they don't get away with this." Rob watched as the police cars drove off, leaving the now empty yard eerily quiet. The damage was substantial. The lawn was torn up, the dock battered, and the house needed a thorough inspection. But for the first time, Rob felt hope. This wasn't over yet. But now, the fight was on his terms. Rob sat in the courtroom, his attorney Mark Williams by his side. The air buzzed with tension as Karen Hendricks, flanked by her high-powered defense team, entered with a haughty expression that barely concealed her nervousness. Behind her, several of the other trespassers filed in, their expressions ranging from sullen to outright fearful. The case had gained local notoriety, with news of Pineview Estate's blatant land grab spreading quickly. The courtroom was packed with reporters, neighbors, and even a few supporters from Rob's lake community. Mark opened with a scathing statement, laying out the facts. Rob owned the property, evidenced by a clear title and tax records. Karen had orchestrated an illegal annexation by fabricating documents. The Pineview HOA had funded unauthorized constructions on Rob's land, damaging it in the process. The most damning detail, Karen had allowed her associates to use Rob's hunting rifle to threaten him. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage from Sarah's phone showed the confrontation, Karen's declarations, and the rifle being aimed at Rob. Utility bills and photos of the property further cemented Rob's claim. Even the police report detailed the rifleman's confession and the forged documents found during the operation. Karen's defense crumbled when she took the stand. Her claim that she acted in the community's best interest was undermined by emails uncovered during discovery, showing she knew the land belonged to Rob, but had decided to improve it for Pineview anyway. One of her emails, presented by Mark, read, "He's never around. We'll file the paperwork, and by the time he notices, it'll be too late." The rifleman's testimony sealed Karen's fate. Trying to minimize his role, he admitted that Karen had encouraged him to intimidate Rob, believing the HOA's influence would shield them from consequences. The judge delivered a scathing verdict. Karen was sentenced to another 10 years in prison for fraud, trespassing, and conspiracy. The rifleman received 12 years for criminal threats and endangerment. Other trespassers faced a mix of conditional sentences, fines, and 1-year jail terms, depending on their level of involvement. The financial penalties were equally devastating. The court ordered 1. Pineview HOA to pay $1.5 million high for damages, including rebuilding costs and emotional distress. 2. Karen to pay $1 million sank. Personally, her assets frozen to ensure payment. 3. An additional $500,000 from the rifleman and other major offenders for punitive damages. As the gavel struck, Rob felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Justice had been served, and his tormentors were finally being held accountable. The sun dipped low over Silver Haven Lake, casting warm golden hues across the water as Rob Peterson leaned against the freshly repaired dock. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore provided a soothing soundtrack, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few months. The property was finally his again, secure, peaceful, and restored. The scars left by Pine View Estate's intrusion had been erased. The torn-up lawn had been reseeded, the damaged gate replaced, and the unauthorized pool had been filled in. Yet, not everything was undone. Rob had decided to keep some of the upgrades, including a sturdy new patio and a grill area, now perfect for family gatherings. Tom and Amy splashed in the water nearby, their laughter filling the air. Sarah sat on a nearby bench, a book in hand, her face calm and relaxed for the first time in weeks. The storm they had weathered together had only strengthened their bond. The legal victory had been more than just a personal triumph. The massive payout, $3 million in total from Karen, the HOA, and the other culprits, not only covered the damages, but allowed Rob to invest in additional security measures. Cameras and motion sensors now guarded the property, ensuring no one could ever try to claim it again. The ripple effects extended beyond their family. News of the trial and its outcome inspired others in the area to stand up to Pine View Estate's overreach. The HOA underwent a complete overhaul, with many of its board members resigning or being replaced. Karen's imprisonment served as a cautionary tale for those who thought wealth and influence could outweigh justice. On this quiet evening, as Rob watched the sunset paint the sky in vivid colors, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the property, but for the strength of his family and the support of his community. "This place feels even better now," Sarah said, breaking the silence. She looked up from her book, smiling at Rob. "It's not just a getaway anymore. It's proof that we can protect what's ours." Rob nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's more than that. It's a reminder that sometimes the fight is worth it." As the stars began to emerge, the Petersons lit the grill, ready to enjoy the first peaceful night of many to come. Silver Haven Lake was theirs again, and this time nothing would take it away.